I discovered my parents canceled my 20th birthday celebration because my younger sister Amy threw a tantrum about not being the center of attention. After years of being the responsible, overlooked child, this betrayal became the final straw. Instead of confronting them, I quietly packed my belongings and disappeared from their lives without warning. What they did not realize was that their seemingly perfect family dynamic was only maintained through my constant sacrifice and support. Their perfect world was about to collapse like a house of cards. My name is Sarah Williams. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a pristine suburban neighborhood in Connecticut where every lawn was perfectly manicured, and every family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. My parents, Thomas and Linda Williams, were pillars of our community. Dad worked as a senior financial advisor at a prestigious firm, while Mom served as the president of the neighborhood association and organized most of the community events. They built our lives around a carefully crafted image of the perfect American family. From an early age, I learned my role in maintaining this illusion. I was the responsible daughter who never caused problems. I maintained straight. As throughout school, participated in appropriate extracurricular activities, and always helped around the house without being asked. I was the daughter my parents proudly displayed at community functions, as evidence of their exceptional parenting skills. Then there was Amy, my younger sister by 3 years. From the moment she was born, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Where I was calm and accommodating, Amy was dramatic and demanding. Where I sought approval through achievement, Amy commanded attention through tantrums and emotional outbursts. As different as we were, one thing remained consistent throughout our childhood. Whenever our needs conflicted, Amy's always took precedence. "Sarah understands," my mother would say, patting my shoulder while rushing to attend to whatever crisis Amy had manufactured that day. "Sarah is so mature for her age." That maturity was forced upon me through years of watching my parents bend over backward to appease my sister. When Amy wanted to quit piano lessons after my parents had already paid for an expensive instrument, they immediately relented. When I asked to switch from soccer to debate team because I discovered a passion for public speaking, I was told to finish the season because we made a commitment. Despite this pattern, I still held out hope that my 20th birthday would be different. 20 felt significant, a milestone worth celebrating properly. When I tentatively approached my parents 3 months before, I was pleasantly surprised by their enthusiasm. "Of course we should celebrate properly," Mom said, actually looking up from her phone where she was typically responding to Amy's latest text demands. 20 is special. Let me talk to your father about budget, and we can start planning." For once, it seemed like I would be the priority. Dad suggested renting a private room at Riverside, the nicest restaurant in town. Mom helped me create a guest list of 30 people, including family, friends from college, and even a few childhood friends who had moved away but might return for the celebration. We reserved the venue, sent digital invitations, and I even purchased a new dress during a rare shopping trip with Mom. The anticipation built over weeks. Friends confirmed their attendance, some even booking flights to join the celebration. My best friend Tara planned to arrive early to help with preparations. For once, I allowed myself to believe that this event would actually be about me. Then, 2 weeks before the birthday, the first cracks appeared. Amy began making subtle comments during dinner. "Will there be anything special for the siblings at this party? It seems weird to just sit there watching Sarah get all the attention," she said while twirling spaghetti around her fork. Mom immediately jumped to reassure her. "Of course, sweetie. We can definitely make sure you have a special role. Maybe you could give a toast?" I noticed my father and mother exchange a look across the table, a silent communication I had seen countless times before. It was the look that preceded a disappointment, the look that said, "We need to manage Sarah's expectations." Still, I held on to hope. The venue was booked, people were traveling. Surely, they wouldn't cancel everything just because Amy was feeling left out. 3 days later, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my worst fears. I had come home early from my part-time job at the library to help Mom with some party details, but paused outside the kitchen when I heard my name. "Sarah will understand," my father was saying in a hushed tone. "She always does. But if we go through with this party the way it's planned, Amy will make everyone miserable for months. I know, my mother sighed. It's just that Sarah's always so good about these things. Amy needs more support right now, with all her college application stress. For the sake of family peace, maybe we can do something smaller for Sarah instead. I stood frozen in the hallway, a familiar emptiness spreading through my chest. The realization was both devastating and clarifying. In their eyes, I would always be secondary. My role was to understand, to accommodate, to sacrifice. Amy's needs would always come first for the sake of family peace. That night, I made no mention of what I'd overheard. I smiled through dinner as Amy complained about her calculus teacher and my parents fawned over her every word. Inside, something had shifted. A decision was forming, not out of anger, but out of a calm recognition of an unchangeable truth. The official cancellation came exactly 3 days before my birthday. I was sitting at my desk, working on a college assignment when my parents knocked on my bedroom door. They entered with those familiar tight smiles that always preceded bad news. "Sarah, honey," Mom began, perching on the edge of my bed while Dad leaned against my bookshelf, arms crossed. "We need to talk about your birthday celebration." Even though I had been expecting this moment, the pain was still sharp and real. I kept my expression neutral as they explained that Amy was going through a really difficult time with the pressure of junior year and college preparation. Apparently, the thought of sitting through an entire evening that centered on celebrating me had triggered an anxiety attack so severe that she had locked herself in her bathroom for 3 hours the previous day. "We think it would be best for everyone if we postpone the party," Dad said, using his reasonable business voice. "We can do something small and quiet on your actual birthday, just the 4 of us. And we'll definitely reschedule the big celebration," Mom added quickly. "Maybe during summer break when Amy's school pressure is off and everyone can truly enjoy it." I looked between them. These people who had raised me, who claimed to love me, and saw only what they had always been. Parents who would always choose the path of least resistance, which meant appeasing their youngest daughter at all costs. "I understand," I said, the words hollow in my mouth. Relief flooded their faces. This was exactly what they had expected from me. Calm acceptance, maturity beyond my years, perpetual understanding. "We'll make it up to you," Mom promised, squeezing my hand. "And you won't have to cancel everything. I'll take care of notifying the venue and your guests." After they left, I sat motionless at my desk. A text message arrived from Tara asking about final party details. Another came from my cousin Jake confirming he had booked his flight from Chicago. The weight of having to share this news with people who had made special arrangements just for me felt overwhelming. But something else was forming beneath the disappointment, a clarity I had never experienced before. This pattern would never change unless I changed it. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. That evening, I sat through dinner listening to Amy talk about her plans to redecorate her bedroom. A project my parents immediately embraced with enthusiastic offers of increased budget. Neither of them mentioned my canceled party, as if the matter had been resolved and forgotten. Later that night, I began my research. I had been working part-time at the library since I was 16 and had managed to save most of my earnings, knowing college expenses would be substantial. What I hadn't told my parents was that I had received a significant scholarship that covered most of my tuition, allowing me to preserve my savings. I spent hours researching affordable apartments near my university, calculating monthly expenses, and reviewing my resume. By morning, I had a plan. The following day, instead of attending my afternoon class, I visited 3 apartment complexes. The third, a modest building 10 minutes from campus, had a small 1-bedroom unit available immediately. The property manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Jenkins, seemed concerned about renting to someone so young, but was impressed by my credit score and savings. "I don't normally do this," she said, "but you seem like you have your head on straight. If you can provide proof of income and a co-signer, the place is yours." The income part was easy. I had already lined up additional hours at the library and applied for a second job at the campus coffee shop. The co-signer was trickier, but I had an ace up my sleeve. My godmother, Ellen, had always seen through my parents' favoritism. When I called and explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "I'll be there tomorrow to sign whatever you need," she said firmly. It's about time you put yourself first, Sarah. The next devastating discovery came when I went to transfer funds from my college savings account for the security deposit. The account, which should have contained over $15,000, showed a balance of just under $7,000. Confused, I requested the transaction history and felt my stomach drop when I saw a withdrawal of $8,000 from 11 months ago, right around the time of Amy's elaborate Sweet 16 celebration. The extravagant party had featured a professional DJ, catered food, designer decorations, and even a minor celebrity appearance from a YouTube star Amy adored. At the time, my parents had mentioned dipping into their special occasions fund. Now I understood what that really meant. They had taken from my future to fund Amy's party. That night, I made two decisions. First, I would move out on my birthday, a fitting symbolism for my new beginning. Second, I would not confront my parents about the missing money. That knowledge was power, and I would hold it close until the right moment. My 20th birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke early, having barely slept, and lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of my family beginning their day. The familiar creaking of floorboards, the shower running, my mother's muffled voice on a phone call. For 20 years, these had been the soundtrack of my mornings. I got dressed and headed downstairs, curious to see if my birthday would merit any acknowledgement. My mother was at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on her tablet, while my father read news on his phone. Amy, predictably, was still asleep. "Morning," my father mumbled without looking up. "Good morning, sweetheart," my mother said, glancing up briefly. "There's coffee in the pot. No happy birthday." No acknowledgement whatsoever of the significance of the day. I poured myself coffee, the final confirmation settling like a stone in my stomach. This was the right decision. "I have a full day of classes, and then study group," I said casually. "I probably won't be home until late." My mother nodded absently. "That's fine. We'll probably order something simple for dinner since Amy has her college counseling appointment this afternoon." I nodded and headed back upstairs, a strange calm settling over me. My suitcases were already packed, hidden under my bed and in the back of my closet. Most of my important documents and valuables were safely stored in a small lockbox at Ellen's house. What remained were the final preparations. After my parents left, my father to work, and my mother to drive Amy to school, followed by her various committee meetings, I began systematically moving through my checklist. I carried my packed bags to my car, parked a block away to avoid suspicion. I gathered the remaining essentials, leaving behind childhood toys and mementos that no longer held meaning. On my desk, I left 3 items: a brief note, my house key, and the birthday check for $100 that my grandmother had sent, which I had decided not to cash. The note was short and to the point. "I've moved out to live independently. I am safe but need space. Please don't try to contact me for a while. Sarah." No accusations, no explanations. They didn't deserve the emotional labor of processing my feelings about their behavior. As I made a final sweep of my room, my eyes fell on the family photo on my nightstand, taken at Christmas 2 years ago. We were all smiling. The perfect family portrait. I knew now how much strain had gone into maintaining that illusion, how much of myself I had suppressed to keep the peace. I left the photo behind, too. The apartment was sparse but clean. Mrs. Jenkins had left a small plant on the kitchen counter with a note wishing me well. Ellen had helped me acquire basic necessities: a futon, a small dining table with 2 chairs, kitchenware, and some groceries. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My new roommate Jessie wouldn't be moving in until the weekend. She was a junior I knew from the library, easygoing and independent, who needed a place closer to campus. We had agreed to share the 1-bedroom apartment temporarily until we could find a 2-bedroom within our budget. I spent that evening, my 20th birthday, assembling a bookshelf, organizing my clothes in half of the small closet, and setting up my study space. No cake, no celebration, no gifts or cards. Yet somehow it felt more significant than any birthday that had come before. Around 9, my phone began buzzing with messages. My parents had returned home and discovered my absence. The first texts expressed confusion, then concern, then anger. "Where are you? Call immediately. This isn't funny, Sarah. Your mother is worried sick. Whatever you're upset about, this isn't the way to handle it. I turned off notifications and continued unpacking. Later that night, as I lay on my new futon staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, I cried. Not from sadness or anger, but from relief. The weight of being the perpetual peacekeeper, the responsible one, the one who always understood, had been lifted. I cried until there were no tears left, then fell into the deepest sleep I had experienced in years. What my parents didn't know, what would become apparent in the coming weeks, was that I had been quietly managing numerous family responsibilities. Bills they thought were on autopay were actually being monitored and sometimes supplemented by me when their accounts ran low. The household maintenance schedule, prescription refills, even the periodic check-ins with elderly relatives, all had been handled silently by me. Their perfect life was built on my invisible support. And now that support was gone. The first week of independence was a brutal adjustment. I juggled full-time classes with increased hours at the library and training at my new coffee shop job. My sleep schedule became erratic, meals were haphazard, and the constant background anxiety about finances was exhausting. Yet underneath it all ran a current of fierce pride. This struggle was mine. These decisions were mine. This life was mine. Jessie moved in that weekend, bringing with her an easy companionship that required little emotional maintenance. She respected my space and privacy, and I returned the favor. We established simple roommate rules and fell into a comfortable rhythm of coexistence. My parents' attempts to contact me escalated dramatically. Calls and texts gave way to emails, social media messages, and eventually physical appearances. They showed up at my classes, waiting outside lecture halls with increasingly desperate expressions. I walked past them without acknowledgement, heart pounding but resolve firm. The most surprising reaction came from Amy. Rather than triumph at having fully secured our parents' attention, she seemed genuinely confused and hurt by my departure. Her texts were less demanding than our parents. "I don't understand what's happening. Please talk to me. Is this because of your birthday? I'm sorry if it is. Everyone's really upset. Dad keeps pacing and Mom cries all the time." I didn't respond to these either, though they were harder to ignore. 3 weeks after I left, they tracked down my workplace. My mother appeared at the campus coffee shop during my shift, eyes red-rimmed and clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. "Sarah, please," she said when I turned to walk away. "Just tell me what we did wrong. We can fix this." The manager, noticing my distress, intervened. "Ma'am, you're disrupting our business. I'll have to ask you to leave." "That's my daughter," my mother protested, voice rising. "I have every right to speak to her." "Not while she's working," my manager said firmly. "And not if she doesn't want to talk to you." The scene she created that day, breaking down in tears and having to be escorted out by campus security, spread quickly through the small university community. I felt a mix of mortification and vindication. For once, the perfect Linda Williams had lost her carefully maintained composure in public. My father tried a different approach, sending a formal letter to my university email. "Your mother and I respect that you feel the need for independence, but the manner of your departure was unnecessarily cruel. We're willing to discuss a more appropriate arrangement that allows you your freedom while maintaining family bonds. In the meantime, we expect you home for Easter dinner." Family traditions must be maintained. The entitlement in his words, the assumption that I would simply fall back in line for the sake of appearances, strengthened my resolve. I did not go home for Easter. Instead, I accepted Tara's invitation to join her family's celebration. The Williams family Easter had always been a showcase event, with my mother's elaborate decorations featured in the community newsletter and guests carefully selected to maintain our social standing. I wondered how they explained my absence. I soon found out through Tara, whose mother remained in my parents' social circle. Apparently, they were telling people I had experienced a nervous breakdown from academic pressure and was taking some time to recuperate. The narrative positioned them as concerned, supportive parents dealing with a troubled child, rather than admitting any role in my departure. This discovery should have angered me, but instead, it triggered something unexpected. Laughter. Genuine, uncontrollable laughter. that brought tears to my eyes. Their desperate attempt to maintain the facade was so transparent, so predictable. I could picture my mother rehearsing her concerned expression in the mirror, my father solemnly accepting condolences for his daughter's condition. My newfound freedom extended beyond the physical. For the first time, I began making choices based solely on my own preferences. I cut my long hair into a practical bob, switched my major from business, my father's choice, to education, my passion, and began volunteering at an after-school literacy program. Each decision, however small, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Friend by friend, I rebuilt my social circle. Some people from high school drifted away, unable to navigate the awkwardness of my family situation. Others, particularly those who had witnessed the dynamic over the years, rallied around me with surprising loyalty. We always saw it, my friend Kate admitted during a study session. The way they treated you compared to Amy. It made us uncomfortable, but we never knew what to say. I didn't either, I admitted. Not until recently. By the end of that first month, I had established new routines and traditions. Sunday mornings became sacred time for reading in a small coffee shop near my apartment. Wednesday nights were for cooking experiments with Jessie. Friday evenings, I allowed myself a few hours of complete leisure, no studying or working allowed. Small rituals of self-care replaced the rigid family traditions I had grown up with. They were modest but meaningful, constructed around my own needs rather than maintaining an image for others. It was during one of these Friday evening relaxation times, scrolling mindlessly through social media, that I discovered just how desperately my parents were trying to maintain their perfect family image. A mutual friend had tagged my mother in photos from a neighborhood function. There she was, smile fixed and brittle, standing beside my father, who looked significantly more haggard than when I'd last seen him. And beside them, looking utterly miserable, was Amy. The caption read, "Wonderful evening with the Williams family. Such resilience and grace during challenging times." Clicking through the comments, I found thinly veiled references to my situation and admiration for how my parents were handling it all. The perfect family narrative was being carefully reconstructed around my absence, with my parents cast as the long-suffering heroes. What the photos couldn't hide, however, were the physical signs of strain. My father's significant weight loss, my mother's overtight smile, Amy's sullen expression. The perfect Williams family was beginning to show cracks around the edges. That night, I received another text from Amy, different from the others. "They're acting like everything's fine, but nothing is fine anymore. Dad forgot to pay the electric bill, and we had no power for a day. Mom keeps burning dinner because she's distracted. I hate how fake they're being about everything." It was the first glimpse I had that my absence was having a tangible impact on their carefully constructed world. And, despite everything, a small part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. 3 months after my departure, the changes in my family became increasingly evident, even from my deliberate distance. I maintained my policy of no direct contact, but information filtered through to me from various sources. My father, once the golden boy at his financial firm, had lost a significant promotion. According to Ellen, who heard it through mutual acquaintances, he had been missing important meetings and making uncharacteristic errors in client presentations. The polished, confident Thomas Williams was slipping, his legendary attention to detail faltering as family matters consumed his focus. My mother's carefully curated social presence began showing undeniable signs of strain. Her neighborhood committee participation dwindled, then ceased entirely. The summer block party, which she had organized for 8 consecutive years, was handled by another family with no explanation offered. Her typically immaculate appearance gave way to hasty, mismatched outfits captured in the background of others' social media posts. Most revealing was the transformation in Amy. Without me as a buffer and caretaker, her relationship with our parents deteriorated rapidly. Her demands, once indulged without question, now met with impatience and frustration. The golden child was tarnishing under the weight of expectations previously distributed between 2 daughters. Through Tara's mother, I learned that Amy had been suspended from school for verbally abusing a teacher. It was precisely the type of situation I would have previously helped manage, smoothing things over with administration, calming our parents, talking Amy through better approaches. Without my intervention, The incident escalated into a major crisis that required my father to miss an important client meeting to address. The Williams family infrastructure was collapsing without its invisible support beam. Their attempts to contact me evolved from angry demands to desperate pleas. My father's authoritative tone gave way to uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Sarah, please just let us know you're all right. We'll respect your space, but we need to know you're safe." My mother's messages became increasingly erratic, alternating between guilt trips, "How could you do this to us?" and bargaining, "Tell us what you want, and we'll make it happen." Amy's communications showed the most growth. Her initial confusion transformed into tentative insight. "I think I get it now. Why you left. They expect me to be both of us, and I can't. I don't know how you did it for so long." I saved these messages but maintained my silence. The time for conversation would come, but not yet. Not until the lessons had fully sunk in. 5 months after I left, their tactics shifted again. They began approaching my friends, suggesting I needed an intervention. They cornered Tara outside her apartment, questioning her about my mental state and implying I was unstable. "They tried to convince me you were having some kind of breakdown," Tara reported, rolling her eyes. "I told them you're the most stable, successful person I know, with straight A's and 2 jobs while they're falling apart. They didn't like that much." Their desperation culminated in an ambush at my apartment building. I was returning from an evening class when I spotted my parents' car in the parking lot. Rather than confronting them, I called Jesse, who created a diversion at the front entrance while I slipped in through the back. We spent the evening with the lights off, watching through the blinds as they eventually gave up and drove away. That night, I received a text from Amy that disturbed me more than any previous communication. "They're fighting all the time now. Dad sleeps in the guest room. Mom started taking some kind of pills that make her zone out. I don't know what to do." For the first time, I felt concern piercing through my protective numbness. My goal had never been to destroy my family, only to remove myself from a destructive dynamic. The thought of Amy alone in that house, navigating our parents' deterioration without support, troubled me deeply. I broke my silence with a single text to her. "Are you safe?" Her response came instantly. "Yes. Just scared about what's happening to them." "You can call Ellen if you need help," I wrote back. "She knows everything." "When are you coming back?" she asked. "I'm not," I replied. "But that doesn't mean we can't have a relationship eventually. That's up to you." The conversation ended there, but something had shifted. A door had been cracked open, allowing for the possibility of a new kind of connection. One built on honesty rather than the toxic patterns of our childhood. The following week, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter from my father. The stationery was from his office, the penmanship precise as always, but the content revealed a man I barely recognized. "Sarah," he wrote, "I was informed today that my position at the firm is being reduced. After 22 years, I find myself demoted rather than promoted. The official reason is restructuring, but my performance reviews tell the truth. I have been distracted, unfocused, making errors that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Your mother has retreated into herself. The woman who once managed our entire social calendar now barely leaves her room some days. Amy is struggling without your stabilizing presence, and I am forced to acknowledge a painful truth. Our family functioned because of you, not despite you. I don't expect forgiveness, or even a response. But I want you to know that I see now what I was too blind to see before. The price of our perfect family was your happiness. And that was never a fair exchange." The letter was signed simply Dad rather than his usual formal father. I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only raw honesty. For the first time since leaving, I allowed myself to feel the full complexity of emotions toward my family. Anger and hurt remained, but alongside them grew something new. Hope that real change might be possible. 6 months after walking away from my family, I agreed to meet my parents. The decision came after careful consideration and consultation with Ellen, who had become my most trusted advisor. "You're strong enough now," she said when I showed her my father's letter. "You've built your own life. You can face them without being pulled back into old patterns." I chose a coffee shop near campus, public enough to prevent dramatic scenes but quiet enough for a real conversation. I arrived early, selecting a corner table with clear sightlines to the exits, a precaution that saddened me even as I recognized its necessity. They arrived together, punctual as always, but the similarity to their former selves ended there. My father had aged years and months, his tailored suit hanging loose on his frame, gray overtaking the temples of his once carefully maintained hair. My mother, always immaculately presented, wore minimal makeup that failed to conceal dark circles beneath her eyes. The moment they spotted me, their expressions transformed from anxious anticipation to naked relief. My mother made an aborted movement as if to rush forward and embrace me. But my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. They had prepared for this, I realized. They had discussed how to approach me. "Sarah," my father said as they reached the table, his voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us." "Please," my mother added, "may we sit?" I nodded, gesturing to the chairs across from me. The formality between us, once so normal, now seemed strange and sad. "You look well," my mother ventured after they were seated. "Healthy." "I am," I confirmed. "I'm doing very well." A silence stretched between us, 20 years of family history suspended in the space of a coffee shop table. "We don't know where to begin," my father finally admitted. "We've practiced this conversation a dozen times, but now that we're here, why don't you start with my birthday?" I suggested, my voice steadier than I had expected. 6 months ago. The day you canceled my celebration for Amy's tantrum." They exchanged glances, a familiar, silent communication, but this time I could read the message clearly. "This is even worse than we thought. We made a terrible mistake," my mother said, her voice catching. "One of many. We didn't realize at the time how much it hurt you." "You didn't want to realize," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." My father nodded slowly. "That's fair. We've had a lot of time to think about patterns in our family. How we always expected you to understand, to accommodate, to be the mature one. While Amy was allowed to dictate family decisions through emotional outbursts, I finished for him." "Yes," he admitted, surprising me with his directness. "We failed both of you in different ways. We taught Amy that tantrums get results, and we taught you that your feelings didn't matter." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "We thought we were doing what was best. Amy was always so fragile, and you were so capable. It seemed logical to lean on your strength." "I was a child," I said quietly. "A child who became capable because she had to." "We know that now," my father said, his business facade crumbling as his voice roughened with emotion. "When you left, everything fell apart. So quickly. All the things you handled that we didn't even know about. Bills, schedules, emotional management. You were holding us together, and we took it completely for granted." The validation of hearing them acknowledge this truth, after years of feeling invisible, was overwhelming. I took a moment to steady myself, sipping my cooling coffee. "And my college fund?" I asked, meeting my father's eyes directly. "The money you took for Amy's Sweet 16? His face drained of color. "How did you—" "I check my accounts regularly," I said. "I always have." My mother looked confused, then horrified as understanding dawned. "Thomas, you said that came from our investment account." "I intended to replace it," he said, addressing both of us. "It was only supposed to be temporary, but then expenses kept mounting, and I never." He trailed off, the excuses sounding hollow, even to himself. I nodded, neither accepting the explanation nor rejecting it. That's part of the pattern, too. Borrowing from my future to fund Amy's present. Before either could respond, the cafe door opened, and Amy herself walked in, scanning the room until she spotted us. My parents looked as surprised as I felt. "Amy?" My mother half rose from her chair. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at study group." "I followed you," Amy said, approaching our table with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I knew you were meeting Sarah today. I need to be part of this conversation." She turned to me, really looking at me perhaps for the first time in our lives. "Can I join you, please?" Something in her expression, a vulnerability I'd rarely seen from my confident, demanding sister, made me nod. She pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat at the fourth side of our square. completing the family circle for the first time in 6 months. "I've been seeing a therapist," Amy announced without preamble. "Since about a month after you left." This was clearly news to our parents, who stared at her in surprise. "You never said," my mother began. "There's a lot I don't tell you anymore," Amy interrupted. Sarah leaving changed everything. It made me see how messed up our family was. How messed up I was. She turned to me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was awful to you. For years, I knew exactly what I was doing, using tantrums to get my way, knowing you'd always be the one to give in. I took advantage of how they treated you because it benefited me. And I'm so sorry." The raw honesty in her voice reached something deep inside me. This wasn't the self-centered sister I remembered, but someone new. Someone capable of genuine reflection. "My therapist helped me understand that I was as trapped in my role as you were in yours," she continued. "The out-of-control, emotional one who never had to face consequences. It wasn't healthy for me either, even though it looked like I was getting everything I wanted." My parents sat in stunned silence as years of carefully maintained family mythology crumbled before them. "When you left," Amy said, her voice breaking slightly, "I was angry at first, then scared. Then, finally, I began to understand. You were the only one brave enough to break the pattern." She reached into her bag and withdrew a small wrapped package. "I know, it's 6 months late. But, happy birthday, Sarah." The simple gesture, so unexpected, broke through my carefully maintained composure. I accepted the package with trembling hands, unwrapping it to find a small silver frame. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before. One of Amy and me as very young children, laughing together on a swing set, before our roles had been established and cemented. "I want to know that person again," Amy said softly. "My sister. Not my emotional caretaker or the family peacekeeper, just my sister." I looked up from the photo to find all three of them watching me, their expressions a mixture of hope and fear. "I can't come home," I said firmly. "That chapter is closed. I have my own life now. One I've built for myself." My mother's face fell, but she nodded in acceptance. "But," I continued, "that doesn't mean we can't build something new, something healthier. It will take time. And work. Professional help." I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card I had been carrying for weeks, uncertain if I would ever use it. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward my father. "This is Dr. Marshall. She's a family therapist who specializes in unhealthy family dynamics. If you're serious about change, this is where it starts." My father picked up the card, studying it before placing it carefully in his wallet. "We'll call tomorrow," he said, and for the first time in my life, I fully believed him. As we prepared to leave, Amy asked the question that had clearly been weighing on all of them. "Will we see you again soon?" I considered for a moment before answering. "Yes, but on new terms. We'll take it slowly." For the first time in our conversation, my mother smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Slowly is better than never," she said. "We'll take whatever you're willing to give." As we parted outside the cafe, there were no dramatic hugs or tearful declarations of love restored. Instead, there was something more valuable, the first fragile seedling of honest communication planted in the wreckage of our old family system. Walking back to my apartment, I felt lighter than I had in months. The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed had finally occurred. And while nothing was magically healed, the path forward was clearer now. For the first time, I could imagine a future relationship with my family built on truth rather than illusion. 1 year after walking away from my family home, I stood in my new apartment, arranging flowers in a vase for the dinner party I was about to host. My life had transformed dramatically in those 12 months. I had completed my sophomore year with honors, secured a promotion at the library, and moved to a better apartment with Jessie, who had become a true friend rather than merely a roommate. The journey to this moment had been neither quick nor easy. The first family therapy session, which occurred 2 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, had been awkward and painful. Dr. Marshall's direct questions forced confrontations with truths long buried beneath our perfect family facade. My father struggled to acknowledge his role in creating the unhealthy dynamic, while my mother vacillated between tearful apologies and attempts to minimize past behaviors. Amy, surprisingly, showed the most willingness to engage with the difficult process. Her individual therapy had given her tools and vocabulary that the rest of us lacked. She spoke openly about her jealousy of my academic achievements, her fear that without dramatic behavior she would be overlooked, and her growing awareness of how her actions had hurt me. "I think I always knew that if I pushed hard enough, they would sacrifice your needs for mine," she admitted during one particularly raw session. "It gave me power, but it also made me feel terrible. Like I was the bad one and you were the good one, and that was just how it had to be." For months, I maintained careful boundaries, participating in therapy sessions, but declining invitations to family dinners or casual visits. I needed them to demonstrate sustained commitment to change before allowing them back into the life I had built. Slowly, evidence of that change began to accumulate. My father entered individual therapy to address his workaholism and emotional detachment. My mother joined a support group for parents working to repair relationships with adult children. Amy's transformation continued, her academic performance improving as she learned healthier ways to seek attention and validation. The most significant moment came 8 months after our first meeting, when my father called with unexpected news. "I've been offered a position at a smaller firm," he said. "Less prestigious, but more flexible hours. Better work-life balance." "Are you going to take it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his decision. "I already have," he replied. "The old me would have considered it a step down. But I've realized there are more important things than status or money, like having time to rebuild relationships with my daughters." It was the clearest evidence yet that his priorities had genuinely shifted. Around the same time, my mother made her own surprising announcement during a therapy session. "I've decided to step down from the neighborhood association presidency," she said. "I'm tired of managing everyone else's perception of our family. I want to focus on what we actually need, not what looks good to others." These concrete changes, more than words or promises, convinced me to gradually lower my protective walls. Now, 1 year to the day after I had walked away, I was preparing to host my family in my own space for the first time. The occasion was significant. My 21st birthday dinner, the milestone my parents had once canceled, would now be celebrated on my terms, in my territory. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. They stood together on my threshold, all three holding gifts and wearing tentative smiles. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. They moved carefully through my apartment, taking in the details of the life I had created independent of them. My mother noted the framed Dean's List certificate on the wall. My father admired the practical furniture arrangement, and Amy immediately gravitated to my bookshelf, examining the titles with genuine interest. "This is nice," my mother said, and I could hear the sincerity beneath the simple words. "It feels like you." Dinner was a small affair. Just the 4 of us, plus Ellen, whose unwavering support had made my independence possible. The conversation flowed more easily than I had expected, focusing on present events rather than painful history. My father spoke about adjusting to his new job. My mother shared stories from her volunteer work at a literacy program, inspired, she admitted, by hearing about my own volunteer activities, and Amy talked excitedly about her college applications. "I'm applying to state," she said, naming my university. "Not because you're there," she added quickly. "They have the best psychology program, but it would be nice to be near you." After dinner, as we moved to the living area for cake, my parents exchanged a glance before my father cleared his throat. "We have something for you," he said, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket. "It's not exactly a traditional birthday gift." I opened it cautiously, finding a bank statement inside. It showed a transfer of $15,000 into my college savings account. "It's the money I took, plus interest," my father explained. "It should have been replaced long ago." "I'm sorry it wasn't. We can never undo our mistakes," my mother added softly. "But we can try to make amends where possible." I studied the statement, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not just financial restitution, but acknowledgement of a deeper betrayal and the commitment to repair it. "Thank you," I said simply. "This means a lot." The rest of the evening unfolded with a warmth I hadn't experienced with my family in years, perhaps ever. As they prepared to leave, Amy hung back slightly, waiting until our parents had stepped into the hallway before approaching me. "I brought you something else," she said, pulling a small package from her purse. "I found it when I was cleaning out the attic last week." Inside was a tarnished silver charm bracelet I had loved as a child, lost years ago during a family move. "I actually took it," Amy confessed. "I was 11 and jealous because Grandma gave it to you instead of me. I hid it in my jewelry box and then was too ashamed to give it back. Finding it again felt like a sign." I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, the familiar weight both strange and comforting. "New start?" Amy offered tentatively. "New start," I agreed, and hugged her briefly before she joined our parents. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain and betrayal that had driven me to walk away. The strength I had discovered within myself. The surprising resilience of family bonds, even when stretched to breaking point. I had learned that sometimes walking away is necessary for healing to begin. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but essential. That true family supports each member equally, valuing their individual needs and contributions. Most importantly, I had learned that patterns can be broken, that people can change when the consequences of their behavior become too painful to ignore, and that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or returning to old dynamics. My 21st birthday, celebrated on my terms in a home of my own creation, symbolized more than just legal adulthood. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in which I would participate in my family relationships by choice, rather than obligation, with boundaries firmly in place and expectations clearly communicated. The path forward wouldn't be perfect. Old habits would resurface, requiring correction and adjustment. But the foundation had shifted from image to substance, from appeasement to respect, from inequality to balance, and that made all the difference. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to protect yourself and ultimately help them change? What boundaries did you set, and were they respected? Comment below with your experiences of standing up for yourself in difficult family situations. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away until people are ready to treat you with the respect you deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to honor your own worth in every relationship in your life.